Hey everybody. Tonight I wanted to share with you some of my astrophotography processing techniques. Um, and what I thought I would do is share with you what I call quick and dirty astrophotography. Um, and the reason being, there is no shortage of time that you could sink into taking images, acquiring images, what we call subs, um, if you're in the biz. Um, and then there's no end to the amount of time you could spend processing the images in different astrophotography suites. A lot of astrophotographers will use a variety of software packages, including Photoshop, um, a paid software called PixInsight, um, and a host of others. And these softwares do a number of things. And I'm not dogging on these methods, okay? But for those of us with limited time and with limited expertise, uh, you can still get really, really good results. Um, Almost with just point and click with your telescope, and then just a little bit of time spent in some software. And I mean, if you look at any of the amateur astronomy astrophotography threads, places like Cloudy Nights or Astrobin, um, you'll come across pictures where folks have said, hey, I spent 15 hours on this particular target, or I spent 20 hours on this target, or 30 hours on this target. Um, and that's an incredible time investment, an incredible time investment. As well as financial investment. Usually, if you're acquiring, 15 hours on one individual target, either your equipment is stationary, and if it's stationary, then you might often have a home observatory, a little dome out back of your yard or somewhere on somebody's property that you can host some sort of telescopic equipment. Or it's a portable rig, meaning you can move it in and out of your house, maybe set it up on your lawn, but if you don't live in a dark enough site, you might be traveling. So, and that's my case. I'm a grab and go astrophotographer. And so what that means is that I'm not acquiring 15 hours on a target. Okay. Um, I feel really good about an imaging session if I get, an hour per target. But since my move back to Louisville, we also have, really, really clear nights, um, infrequently enough that I don't think it would be worth it for me to try and get 30 hours on a particular target. And the reason being, because I'm a grab and go astrophotographer, that means I'm constantly setting my equipment up and tearing it down, and that slightly changes the orientation of your cameras relative to your optics. It means that you're constantly adjusting the focus of your scope. You're always constantly polar aligning. And so if, your polar alignment is off from one night to the next, then your tracking is going to be off. And if even if your tracking is off, in other words, if your mount is not tracking perfectly, um, on a given night, if your polar alignment is even different the next time you're imaging, then your mount can be off at a different rate, right? So the rate at which your images drift can be different from night to night, and that poses a pretty serious challenge, or at least it can. And then if your camera is oriented slightly, differently, that can also pose a stacking challenge. So I haven't, I've obviously imaged objects on different nights, but I haven't used the data from different nights to combine one single image. And for a grab and go astrophotographer, that's what you would have to do if you're going to get, say, 10 plus hours on a particular target. So my methodology is literally just point shoot, um, and then spend the minimum amount of time in the post processing stages to get decent results, because we all have lives. We have better things to do than spend 15 hours at a computer processing an image, just to tweak every little last detail that you can out of it. Um, and so, if you my methodology that I want to share in this video is really for the people who are newer to the hobby, wanting to get decent results, but don't necessarily have the more sophisticated software packages, and aren't necessarily interested at this particular moment in time going through the process of the learning curve of some of those software packages. Every new piece of sophisticated software has its own learning curve, its own barriers to use. You have to sift through tutorials or online guides, or do-it-yourself tutorial videos, whatever. And it can be a time sink in and of itself, and then the time sink of it processing the image. Now, that said, I'm also not a pixel peeper. Okay, so I'm not going to blow up my images and just analyze every single pixel to make sure every single star is exactly round, and all of these things. If I'm happy with my final product, then that's good enough for me. And my standard is decently high, I like to think, for the way I want my image to actually look at the end of the day. But I'm also gracious with myself, I like to think, in that if my image is not absolutely perfect or noise free, then like, I'm gonna throw it out and whatnot. And I'm not trying to, again, I'm not trying to dog on the astrophotographers who do that. Um, but again, I have limited time. This is not my job. It's a fun hobby, and I really enjoy it. But it is not, my vocation. So I want to spend as little bit of time as possible, both collecting my data and processing my data, so that this doesn't take up all my time. So what I thought I would do is share with you a couple of the things that I've learned and how to get a pretty good result using minimal amount of processing, and using free software packages. Okay, so first things first, what's the whole hullabaloo? Okay, so the standard, or one of the standard software packages in the amateur astrophotography community is called SharpCap. And SharpCap is really good for what it does. It communicates. You have to install your camera's drivers if you're using something like a dedicated astrophotography camera, from the ZWO company, or the QHY company, QHY CCD company. But once you get those drivers installed, it works really seamlessly. Um, and you can, it has all of the typical adjustments, time, gain, a host of controls. If your camera is a pro cooled version, you have your thermal controls. easily connects with things like filter wheels. And so it's a really, really great software. And one of the features is called the live stack, right? And stacking images is a great way to sharpen images and pull out detail um, that would be rather difficult to acquire over a single exposure. And this is particularly true in astrophotography because unless you're guiding, and by the way, I don't guide with my mount, so that's something I'm looking to do. But again, that's a learning curve, and that's a pretty hefty time investment to learn how to do, and I haven't done that yet. So my mount does not. I don't have auto guiding connected to my mount. So I try to get as good a polar alignment as I can at the very beginning of my session, and then I just go. And the live stack feature allows you to, in real time, stack your images um, in SharpCap, and you can stretch the histogram there right in front of you, and you can even stretch the contrast between your whites and blacks. And so it's a pretty robust feature, right? But because the stacking is done live, it performs an average function, right? So it averages. So it first of all it aligns your images. So if there has been any shift in your images, if your mount has drifted at all, then it aligns the images based on the star pattern, and then it adds the images or stacks the images via an average algorithm. And this isn't bad, and it actually retains pretty good signal to noise. But if you have things like hot pixels running through your image, then it keeps those in it. Okay, and so as an example of this, this is a picture of the Pleiades that I shot almost a month ago, and you can clearly see, especially if we kind of zoom in here, you can clearly see some of these streaks, like right here, right? And you can even see, even without the really bright streaks, you can see a general kind of smearing of some of the nebulosity, kind of this direction, right? And that's the direction the mount was drifting. Okay, so again, this is kind of like a camera alignment issue. My camera was not oriented such that the right ascension direction would have been across one, or would have been parallel with one axis of my chip on my camera, and the declination would not have been parallel with the other axis, right? So that's one particular issue of camera rotation. But in any case, okay, you can clearly see the noise. Now, this particular image has had its histogram stretched quite a bit, right? And that's naturally going to pull out any noise that is inherent in your image. But at the same time, this is pretty severe. So what these streaks are right here, these are hot pixels. It's a single hot pixel, but because the mount is drifting in each individual stacked image, that hot pixels average is above the average of the other pixels, and therefore the average of the stack is higher than it would be otherwise. And so averaging your stack does not get rid of these kinds of hot pixel features. Now, this is another kind of limitation that a lot of people will kind of, rail at you for, and they're saying, well, why would you use live stack anyway? If you're going to do it the right way, you need to shoot your calibrations, your biases, your darks, and your flats, and then you need to include those in your processing, and then you combine your images and do your stacking and then do your post processing. And being an astronomer who has done their fair share of calibration images, I can't argue with the logic. However, I would say this: that is incredibly important if you're doing science. So if you're doing photometry, for example, you absolutely have to have your images calibrated. If your images are not calibrated, then you're not going to be able to claim that any photometric results are scientifically valid. Astrophotography, on the other hand, really is an art, and as has been told to me by a few different people, there are no rules, right? There are no rules. So if you get a result that you're happy with, no matter how you got there, then that's really all that matters, right? And so the technique that I want to show you here in this video is going to kind of walk you through step by step how to get an image that's denoised out of these kinds of mount tracking streaks, and at least some of the kind of camera noise that you're seeing in here, get rid of that without doing bias dark flat calibrations. Okay, now the technique that I'm going to show you will not necessarily address vignetting from flat field or dust Cheerios from flat fielding effects. So if you have things like dust artifact parts of your image, what I'm about to do is not going to correct those. Okay, but if you have a relatively dust-free optical system and camera, and the main sources of your noise and imperfections visually in your image are from the camera itself, the hot pixel kind of issue, then the technique I'm about to show you actually can do rather well in addressing those issues, again without the necessity of bias dark and flat correction. And the reason that I'm kind of leaning this direction is because this is going to sound a little bit persnickety, but because I didn't write the code for a lot of the other programs that do the calibration correction, I can't vouch that the program does them correctly. And I've even seen professional photometry software being argued about in different papers as to whether the software did calibration correction correctly. So, without knowing how PixInsight does the calibration correction or how Cyril does the calibration correction, until I can vouch that it's done the right way, I'm honestly not going to worry about it too much. And you look at this picture. So this was shot with my Astrotech AT60 EDP Petzval refractor. I have another video on a review of that particular instrument, and there aren't really too many flat fielding concerns just in this image, but also the flat fielding is going to be eliminated a little bit because of the drift. So if there is a dust donut, that dust donut is kind of going to be drifting through the image, and it's going to get smeared out and be harder to see than if it were just a very stable image. And so this is another reason why I call this quick and dirty astrophotography, because without auto guiding and without having your mount tracked for being able to stay on being able to keep certain parts of your target on certain pixels over an extended period of time, i.e. minutes, without the ability to do that, then you're almost relegated to shorter exposures and then stacking a whole bunch of short exposures as opposed to stacking a few several minute exposures. Okay. But to give you an example of the kind of motivation behind this, okay, the same night I took another image of the Pleiades and I got this. And if you compare the two, you can definitely tell that the second image is not as bright in terms of the nebulosity, although the nebulosity is still there. You can absolutely see it, and I'm really happy with this picture. But if you zoom in, those hot pixel streaks are nearly non-existent, right? Those hot pixel streaks are nearly non-existent, and that's because this image was collected with live stacking, and therefore the average combining method, which means that any hot pixels, that hot value carries through the average of all of the pixels in that area, and therefore it bumps up the average of that particular pixel, and you can see the pattern of the hot pixels running through. The other image, this image, was a combination of about 100 individual images that were then stacked into Deep Sky Stacker, combined into a single image and then processed in the GIMP, histogram stretched in the GIMP. Okay, and so the main difference is this was averaged, this was median. So when you median stack, what you're doing is you're telling your software, don't average all of the pixels in the stack for this particular pixel. Don't average them up, but take the median. And the idea is that if you have signal and your tracking is relatively stable, so from each image to each image, if your mount hasn't drifted the entire width of a small star, say a star like here, then as you stack those images after they're aligned, then each stack is going to have several or each pixel that's aligned, let's put it this way, each pixel that's aligned is going to have several images of the star, even if the mount is drifting a little bit. Each pixel is going to have several images of the star, and therefore the median is going to be in the value of the star and not the background. But what it also does is if you only have a single hot pixel that's drifting through the image as the mount is drifting slightly, then what that means is that that pixel, if your mount is drifting at all, that pixel drifts through the image. So when the images are aligned, you get this pattern here, but because the algorithm is median stacking, that the pixel that was hot gets thrown out, and only the median value gets chosen for that particular pixel. And therefore the median, you do lose a little bit of brightness, you lose a little bit of signal to noise, but you get a much cleaner image. Okay, and that's the motivation behind median stacking in a software like Deep Sky Tracker. The problem is, or one of the problems is, that you have to take all of your individual subs, you store them together, and then you run them through the Deep Sky Stacker program, and it does. There are other algorithms besides average and median, but those are the two that I would recommend anybody starting out with start to use before they start using any of the others. Learn how to use those and what they mean and what they're doing before using things like sigma clipping and any of the other techniques. Okay. But, so this is not the technique I wanted to show you because live stacking in SharpCap, in my opinion, is really handy, even if you have these drawbacks of the hot pixel issue. Um, it's really handy because you can start to do some of your image processing in real time as the images are coming in. And you can do this in the free version of SharpCap. There is a pro version of SharpCap, which has a ton of features. But if you're just starting out and you're not worried about real-time flat field correcting, you're not worried about controlling your mount from SharpCap, then the free version is going to be fine for you. You may want to upgrade at some point, but the live stacking in SharpCap is incredibly convenient to be able to kind of see how your images are coming out. You get a pretty good indication of the quality of your images up front. Another added bonus is if your images are out of focus, if your scope is out of focus, it becomes pretty apparent in the live stacking, as the stars stack on top of each other. If they're not incredibly sharp when they should be, then that's a pretty good indication of being out of focus. And an individual stacked image might not have the signal to noise for you to notice that right away, because brighter stars are going to be saturated anyway, and smaller stars in the background are going to be dim on any one individual sub, especially if they're only a few seconds long, maybe 10 seconds long. So what I have developed, and this algorithm I'm sure is in no way, shape, or form unique to me, but I'm sharing it here, and that is take several live stacked images. So this particular image was like, 7 or 8 minutes, okay? But instead of doing that, take several, maybe 15 individual images that are in the live stack, save that particular stack, and then do it again. And what that will do is then you can median stack those average stacks. And I like this for a few different reasons. Number one, it removes almost completely the need for bias, dark, and flat subtraction or calibration, because your flats aren't subtracted, they're divided. But it almost completely removes the need for that unless you have a really severe flat field effect in your image. Or if you have really noticeable dark current or amp glow from your camera. The cameras that I have are amp glow free, and so the amplifiers inside the circuitry are not, putting light onto the chip, and having some sort of light gradient across the image. But if you have a camera that doesn't have amp glow, then your dark current should not necessarily be immediately visible in your images just by looking at them, right up front, without a little bit of detailed study. If you don't have any amp glow in your cooler was sufficiently working, then your dark current shouldn't be visible. It'll still be there, but it shouldn't be immediately visible in your image and say, "Whoa, there's a dark current running through here," or there's a obvious temperature gradient across the pixels. And so, to kind of demonstrate this method, I want to go through a process here, take you through some imaging processing. And so what I've done is I have 5B images, 5G images, blue, green, and then I have 3H alpha images and 5 red images. And these are all the result of 14, 15, 16, or 17 individual images that went into a live stack in SharpCap and then saved, and then the process restarted. So we can look at a B image, for example, and if we blow this up, I mean, it's a fairly clean image. It's a fairly clean image, but for example, right here, you can see a string of hot pixels, right? So if you really wanted to, you could count the number of pixels across, and that would tell you how many images went into this stack. And so then if we go to the next B image, and we kind of zoom in here, now you can see that same feature, but now it's kind of drifted, right? And so when I align these two images, those hot pixels are not going to be lying on top of each other, and they're going to be medianed out, right? And so that's the whole idea behind taking a few individual or taking you know, any given number of images in a live stack, and then using the live stacks to median stack, and that will get rid of these hot pixels without sacrificing the advantage that averaging gives you in terms of signal to noise over median. Okay. And by the way, can I just say that I really like this setup. In the comment section of the video that I did on the AT60 EDP, somebody said, "Oh gosh, it looks like you've got pinched optics," and that kind of ruined my recommendation for that person. Me personally, yes. After looking at these kinds of star shapes, this is the shape that is indicative of pinched optics. So there's probably a lens clamp somewhere in the optical train, the series of lenses that is maybe tweaked a little too tightly or something. But to me, I mean, honestly, I really don't mind it. It reminds me of, you know, reflector diffraction spikes from, say, a Newtonian. So, and to me, that it just doesn't really diminish the quality of this overall image. And here, the difference between the black and the gray is where the mount was drifting while I was live stacking. And so, you know, you can kind of go through each of these and kind of see what's going on. Look for all of your, you know, hot pixel streaks, or at least some of your hot pixel streaks. But so, you know, I like I said, I'm not really a pixel peeper. This right here is perfectly fine with me, right? That is a beautiful image. And can I just say that the ASI 2600 is a phenomenal camera, okay? Especially for medium to small instruments. And the AT60 EDP is a 300 millimeter, not milliliter, oh, a millimeter focal length, which is, you know, on the smaller side for refractors. But you can see that, you know, its Petzval design gives you a flat field all the way up to your edges, right? So if you look at your edges up here, the stars really don't have appreciable coma. You might start to see just a little bit of stretching, but really, if there's stretching up here, it is very slight. Okay, maybe just a shade up here, but overall, that's an amount of coma that I can absolutely live with. You know, in the context of that image, it's very slight. It does not detract from the image whatsoever. It'd probably be more noticeable on a full frame sensor like a 6200. But in any case, I'm really happy. And so this is obviously shot with B filters. So I have the monochrome version, and then the G images were caught with the green filter, H-alpha filter, and red filter. Okay. And so just to kind of demonstrate what you can do, so like I said, I really haven't taken the time to, download the more sophisticated software packages and, really take the time to go through the learning curves with those. Um, and so for my, just kind of quick processing um, and stacking, the Astro Art demo is perfectly sufficient. Okay, so it's a free download. The demo is free. It doesn't. The one drawback and the one reason why I'm, almost to the point where I'll either pay for a slightly better software package, more comprehensive software package, or um, take the time to learn the free software packages like Cyril, is because you cannot save your results here. You have to kind of, maybe do a screen grab, which diminishes the resolution. But in any case, just to get something usable and workable, this is perfectly fine. So, um, if you're going to use Astro Art, if you're going to do color combining and if you're going to do any sort of stacking, what you want to do is you want to come up here to Tools first, come to Pre-Processing, and then navigate to your folder, wherever your particular images are. And this will default to either TIFF or FITS generally, okay? I like to work with PNGs. In a lot of cases, not all the time, but PNGs are a really, decently small file size for the quality, and SharpCap will save in PNGs. And so I really like PNGs because, if you're out in the field with a laptop, you have limited disk space. You don't want something, you don't want a file size, especially if you're going to be capturing several hundred images, or if you're going to be capturing several stacks that contain hundreds of images, then you are, you're going to be using you're going to be putting stuff on your disk at a pretty fast rate. So even if you have, several gigabytes of room available, one imaging session, especially depending on the length of your exposures, could easily eat up a couple of gigabytes, if not more. Right. So I like the PNGs because they keep the file, the total amount of storage space required down. Okay. So as you can see in this particular folder, I have all of these PNGs, and since that's what I'm asking the program to find, it found them. But I want to stack my individual images for my individual colors first. So I'm going to select just the B images. I'm going to drag those over into the images area. And you'll notice that this is default to, it's set by default to average, and I want to do median. Now, because my telescope has been drifting, I want to align the images while they're stacking. And so I'm going to click on the Options tab and come over here to Auto Alignment. And when you click on this, you can say, okay, I'm only going to align the images based on the star pattern. But if you're using an Alt-Az mount and not an equatorial mount, or if you had to do a peer flip with your equatorial mount, then your pictures are not going to be oriented exactly the same. If you're using an Alt-Az mount without a rotator on your camera, then your each image as the telescope tracks is going to be slightly rotated a little bit, unless you have an equatorial wedge. But I mean, you absolutely could pick this, but in this case, all of our images were on the same side of the meridian, and it's an equatorial mount, and therefore you only need to select star pattern. If you have an Alt-Az mount or needed a peer flip, then you would use star pattern with the translation plus rotation. Okay. All right. So, um, come back here. Yep, make sure median is picked. And so then you just hit OK, and it's going to stack these images, picking the median value of the stacked, or not the stacked, but the median value of the aligned image. Okay, and here's the result, which is pretty good. That's a pretty sharp picture. Um, and okay, so one thing, if you have your images in the native picture viewer in Windows, using the scroll button on your mouse will zoom in and out, whereas with AstroArt, your scroll button actually changes the contrast of the image, right? So you can increase the brightness of your saturated parts, or you can decrease it. And I actually like to keep mine right about here for the Andromeda Galaxy, and I'll explain why. But what I do want to do is zoom in. Maybe let's go up to 200. And first things first, those stars look pretty good. Come down here, and you'll notice the median stacking seemed to do its job. There's really no evidence of any hot pixel streaks. And so, yeah, you even get a little tiny dust lane in M32 there, which is really cool. Um, and so, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that result. Um, and so we will do the same thing with the um, G and the R. And I'm actually going to combine the H alpha with the R to pull out just a little bit of detail in the H alpha range that wouldn't be visible with the R range alone. But I will make one comment, and one of the reasons why I like to keep the central bulge diminished, if you have the central bulge lighter, if you're using the scroll button to change the contrast, yeah, it does make the overall image a little bit brighter, but I really like these dust lanes that are coming out of the core, the nucleus of the galaxy. These dust lanes kind of start the spiral structure, and I just think that they're incredibly beautiful. And they're kind of like a litmus test for me as far as the Andromeda Galaxy goes. If you can resolve those dust lanes, then your image quality is good enough, right? Um, I mean that's just that's pretty cool. I can't lie. That's pretty cool. Um, if you're in and around astronomy, and you have a passion for it, and realizing what the Andromeda Galaxy represents in terms of a different galaxy, uh, you know, uh, several 100 billion stars, planets galore, most likely. If that doesn't make you excited to learn about the universe, then I don't know what does. So, yeah, and it's one of the easiest targets to shoot as far as deep sky objects go, right? Okay, so we're going to do the same thing with the G filter. When you've already run one particular filter, what you want to do is hit the reset button. And if your images are in different places, then you would need to navigate to the new folder. I'd collected all my images and renamed them, which is why they're already here, but in any case. So we're going to click and drag the G images, and we've already got the median checked, and we're aligning on our star pattern, and here we go. Pardon me. So once again, gonna change the contrast just a little bit, bring out those dust lanes. But again, we can, zoom in here. And again, not really seeing any evidence of mount tracking or hot pixel streaks, but you're still gaining the benefits of average stacking, which increases your brightness just a little bit over median stacking by itself. So median stacking a stack of averaged images seems to work just fine, right? It seems to work just fine. And then we'll do the same thing with the R. And we're going to include the H alpha in here. Pardon me, it's late. So yeah, pretty cool. Let's go to zoom and let's check this out. Very cool. There's the dust lanes toward the nucleus. And again, no real strong evidence of, hot pixels running through the image, which is really cool. Okay, so now we're ready. We're going to color combine this into a single color image. And so once you have all three of your colors loaded, and notice we've got the three images down here, pre-processing 1, pre-processing 2, pre-processing 3. So the first image is going to be our blue image, second image is going to be green, third image is going to be our R. So you can come over here to color and click on trichomy, and that brings up this menu. And now you can assign your channels. It'll automatically default to just picking one of the images to be the red. We'll assign that here in just a second, but you can start in any order you like. I like to start with blue because that's usually my first image. So I'm going to assign the first image to the blue channel. I'm going to assign the second image to the green channel. I'm going to assign the third image to the red channel. And notice that they're all slightly displaced. But the align feature here, I've seen a few images where it didn't work quite right and you had to manually adjust, but in most cases it works almost perfectly. So just hit automatic and there you can see the final image is aligned. And if we click finish, then we get this image. And golly, that's pretty cool. The clarity in the dust lanes is impeccable. And by the way, for this particular set of stacked images, I only did about 15 minutes per filter, right? So this is a total of 45 minutes in this image. Okay, so about 3 minutes per individual stack, and then since there were 5 images here, or 5 stacked images here, 5 stacked here, 5 stacked here, not counting the H alpha. But yeah, so this was about 3 minutes. I'm sorry, each of these was about 3 minutes. And so, yeah, each of those was about 3 minutes. So there's 15 minutes right here. Each of these was about 3 minutes. So there's 15 minutes from here to here, and then 45 minutes from here to here. So you know, okay, 53 minutes, 54 minutes, just a little bit under an hour. But for this particular result, that's really not bad for an hour's worth of imaging. And another thing I like about AstroArt is you can also, even in the demo version, you can adjust the color curves. And there not much needs to be done to this, but if you wanted to get, really, really close to, what you might see in textbooks, for equal times, usually blue is not as equitably gained by your camera as G or R is, and that's just due to a number of different factors. So we can kind of increase the blue here a little bit, and that makes that gives it a little bit more natural color, so it doesn't kind of have that green hueish glow to it. But that's a pretty cool image, right? For an hour's worth of work and just a few minutes of processing, really not bad. And again, if you wanted to, you could come in here and kind of zoom around and look at some of the details, which is pretty cool. There's those dust lanes. The nucleus is not overexposed, and you still have the detail in the galaxy itself, even with the nucleus not exposed or not saturated. Now you could obviously, kind of play around with this. You could bring out the dust lanes a little bit more at the expense of the nucleus becoming saturated. And for science, like if you were looking at an image like this, suppose the CCD chip or the CMOS chip, predated actual astronomical as scientific astronomy, right? And you were actually doing, some sort of science with this kind of image, then it might be beneficial to overexpose the core and really, really study the dust lanes in as much detail as possible. But since we're not doing that, this is a pretty picture, not a scientific picture, then we really don't need to do that, right? So we can bring the central bulge back down to a manageable level, even at the expense of the galaxy itself. It's a little dimmer, but the detail visible with the less dim central bulge, in my opinion, well worth it, right? So there you've got it. You've got a pretty nice image, right? Who's going to complain about that? For an hour's worth of imaging and an hour's worth of processing. And if you follow the steps in this video, then it certainly won't, your next few targets will not take you an hour to process. It'll be on the order of minutes, right? But there's one other quick technique I wanted to show you guys. And this is kind of a bias and dark subtraction cheat, okay? So, but once again, there are no rules, so I'm not really, I'm not ashamed of this, okay? So I wrote a program in Python, and this is what I call image denoiser. Now it's labeled image denoiser test 2 because it was a test and it actually worked, and I just never changed the name of the program. Okay, so what this does is this loads, and by the way, this is in the same area that the images are in, so it knows where to go find them. What this program does, Okay, let's just run the program. I want to denoise image B1, right? So I'm going to open up this image. I'm going to do something to it, and I'm going to save it as B1 denoised. Okay, so let's run it and see what happens. Might take Python a minute to wake up. There it goes. Again, might take a minute to run through. Oftentimes, the first time you run a Python program in a brand new kernel, it can take it'll take a little bit longer than it would otherwise. But there's the result, right? So, the image on the left is the original image. The central image is what's called the image with box. And then the denoised image is the image on the right. And you can see that the background is considerably darker than in the other two. So what this program does, okay, what this program does is it allows you to specify the upper left and bottom right corners of a box, and then takes the pixels within that box and averages them up, and then subtracts that average from the whole image. So again, this would not work if you had a visible dark current or amp glow running through your image. Either one of those is going to flummox this technique. But if you have a relatively stable camera with zero amp glow and it's cooled down to where your dark current is not, a visible artifact in your image, then this is going to be a decent way to get rid of any, not any, there will still be some, but at least rid of some of the background. Yeah, so it averages all of the pixels up in this box, and then you can specify what fraction of that average you want subtracted. So you can subtract 0. If I typed in a 0 here, then my average pixel value would be multiplied, the average that I calculated in that entire box for each pixel would be multiplied by 0, and I wouldn't be subtracting anything. Or, you could get crazy with it and you could subtract, twice. But for most astronomical purposes or astrophotographic purposes, maybe something like 0.5 or 0.8 would be prudent. And so then it's going to subtract that average pixel value out of the whole image. And so this is where the art in this kind of thing really comes in. Astrophotography is definitely an art, not a science. So it's your job to find a set of pixels for which there aren't really stars and is a representative sample of true noise. Okay, so let's see if we can find this box here. Well, let's just come up here. It's going to be really, really small. But you can see the values here. And if you look really closely, you can see it right down here. Okay. So we can inspect this box. And this box actually has a couple of stars in it. So I actually want to change the corners. So let's come back up here and let's actually kind of look at the image whole scale here, at least one part of the image whole scale. and maybe this region right down here might not have too many stars. So let's look at this area right here. This is pretty devoid of stars right in this region. And if there are stars here, then they're not bright enough to really be visible above the background. So we can draw a box right in here, get several thousand pixels, and that'll be good enough, right? Maybe not several thousand, but at least several hundred we will have. So yeah, several hundred. So let's write down these numbers. Let's remember these numbers. 445 and 1613. So this is going to be the upper left corner. 445 and 1613. So 445 and 1613. Whoop. And then where do we want the bottom corner to be? Somewhere around out here. And pardon me. So 513 and 1660. So this is going to be 513 and 1660. Okay. All right, so it's not really going to make a ton of difference. You're not really going to be able to see the difference between the two denoised images visually, but it's your own peace of mind that you're not playing with the average by allowing a star to be included in your box, right? These files might take a little bit of time to process because you're, the 2600 camera is a 20 megapixel camera, and therefore the file sizes can be decently large. But yeah, here we go. We've got our denoised image. Again, it doesn't really look any different than the previous one, but at least we're not including stars in our background average. And then once you have that done, you can come back over here and you'll notice that it saves the new denoised picture, and you can open it up and you can look at it, and sure enough, the background seems to be a little bit dimmer than in the other picture. So let's kind of open this up side by side, right? So you can definitely see the difference, right? You can definitely see the difference. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these one by one here in this video. I've already done this. Okay, so I have all of my denoised images already. All right, but what we can do now is come back over here into AstroArt, and let's process all of these. So we will reset, and we will come into the M31 denoised, and we will look at the B. Whoops. That's not what I wanted. Okay, there we go. Don't know why I'm yawning so much. But in any case, all right, so there is a contrast adjusted B image. And your galaxy might not be quite as bright as before, but you are subtracting a little bit of signal out of the entire image. So this is why I call it, kind of quick and dirty astrophotography, because you're not really calibrating the image. You're just kind of removing noise out of the background via a simple average subtraction. Not really a statistically sound method, but again, art is in the eye of the beholder. If your end result is, makes you happy, then that's good enough. And no, you don't have to justify yourself to anyone else. This is not for science. We're not doing photometry on any of these things. So I'm really just interested in making, a pretty final result. So here we go. Let's look at the G. And let's do the R. I think I'm missing the R5, but that's quite okay. For the purposes of this demonstration, it's really not bad. It's not necessary. All right, so there is the R. All right, so now notice that my original three are still here, right? So I've got my B, G, and R from the first round. Its color picture, and now I've got the B, G, and R of the second picture, right? So once again, come over here to trichomy, and this was 4. Yeah, not trichomy, but pre-processing 4. There we go. Pre-processing 5. And pre-processing 6. And it's auto-aligning. Yes. Yes. Something's not quite right. Hang on. No, that's right. Just out of curiosity, because I think something's not quite right here. So actually what I'm going to do is this. Let's come back here, take a quick screen grab. And we will hold on to you. So let's paste. Okay, so we're going to set this aside for future reference. I'm going to close out here because I'm not sure that something was working exactly the way it should, but we'll find out. Basically, I want to do a side-by-side comparison of the trichomy results with the original raw stack results and the denoised stack results. So we want to make sure that we are median combining, and we want to align our star pattern. And let's do that again, but with the G. And finally the R. Okay. There we go. Okay, so once again, let's do our trichomy. And blue is 1, green is 2, and red is 3. So now you can see that they're offset from each other, and we automatically align them, and there we go. Okay. And let's do the color curve where we kind of just make the blue pop just a little bit more. There we go. And we can now do a side-by-side, right? Looking at these two images, it's really, a personal preference kind of thing. I like the denoised image a little bit more, because even though you are subtracting a little bit of signal, you're subtracting a little bit of photon count even out of the stars, you're changing the value of the background by a larger percentage. So your background is dying off, assuming your background is rather uniform. You're taking more out of your background, even up to 100%, whereas you're taking a few percent, or even if you're taking 30 or 40% out of given stars, that percent change is still not as much as the noise, and so it still makes it pop just a little bit more, in my opinion, right? So like some of these features right here, for example, are a little bit more prominent in the denoised image than, say, right here. And this is an NGC number. I forget what NGC number it is, but it's a star forming region in one of the spiral arms. Again, it's just a little bit more prominent along with the associated dust lanes. So I like the denoised image, and it calibration images can be a pain. Your bias images you don't really have to worry about because they're 0-second exposure, so you can just put a lid on your optical tube or the dust cap, and you can shoot 101 biases because they're 0-second exposures, or as short as your camera can go. You can shoot 101 of those in just a couple seconds. Your darks, though, you have to be a little bit more careful because you either have to scale your darks per your image. So, in other words, your darks, if you're going to dark correct, you should only shoot darks at the same exposure times and at the same gain as what your images that you're correcting are, or make sure that the times are scaled, but you still need the same gain. Okay, and flats, whether you do sky flats, dawn flats, dome flats, or in the case of a lot of refractor owners, the white t-shirt flat. Um, Flat fielding is one of the most difficult things to get right in observational astronomy. And if you have a camera and lens system that's rather free of dust and vignetting, then you don't even really have to worry about it, right? And so this method that I've shown you here does not require any special calibrations. You completely bypass that and you still get a really, really lovely result. So once again, I would argue that for an hour of collecting data at the telescope and a few minutes of data processing, this is quite a beautiful image. And then you can screen grab that for whatever you like. And then you're done. But yeah, so I really like this method. It allows you to keep using the live stack option in SharpCap, which is a great feature for certain things. And then if you take several individual live stacks and median combine them, then it really takes any of the hot pixels right out. And so it's really a fantastic option. Okay, so that is my video on quick and dirty astrophotography. All right, guys, we will talk to you next time.